Elvis Costello, Elton John, a large piano, a wonderful group of musicians. What you're about to see really is a spectacle.
Holy Moses, I have been removed. I have seen the specter, he has been there too. Distant cousin from down the line, random people who ain't my kind. Holy Moses, I have been removed.
Holy Moses, I have been deceived. Now the wind has changed directions, and I have to leave. Please excuse my frankness, but that's not my cup of tea. Holy Moses, I have been deceived.
I'm going back to the water where my affairs and abuse. I can't take any more bad water. I've been poisoned from my head down to my shoes. Oh. Holy Moses, let us live in peace. Let us strive to find a way to make all hatred cease. There's a man over there. What's his color? I don't care. He's my brother. Let us live in peace. He's my brother. Let us live in peace. Oh, please, my brother. Let us live in peace. Please consider the great monarchs and noblemen of music. King Pleasure, King Oliver, Prince Buster, Duke Ellington. Take it down, fellas. But I have to tell you sorrowfully and truthfully, Count Basie was not a real count. Nat King Cole, not a real king. And Queen Latifah, not in the technical sense. But tonight's guest on Spectacle has risen to be a genuine knight of the realm, an international music superstar, a tireless humanitarian, and one of the most passionate music fans that I have ever encountered. My lords, ladies, and gentlemen, please welcome Sir Elton John. Elton, I'm going to talk about a lot of things that I know that you're very passionate about music. And I will say that for those of you that don't remember it because you're too young, there was this incredibly rich period of music from about 1968 to 1971 when the introspective singer-songwriters achieved equal importance with heavy rock. Composers and sometimes eccentric-sounding singers such as Randy Newman and Laura Nyro wrote hit tunes and had big successes. Now, your first records, Elton, were really grouped together with those singer-songwriters like James Taylor, Neil Young, Carole King, Cat Stevens. Did you feel companionship with them?
Absolutely. The Beatles started everything off with writing their own songs, and let's not forget how important that was in the history of popular music, because Elvis Presley always relied on songs written by other people. And in those days, songwriters were a professional performer. They weren't performers. They were told to write songs for other people, and there were so many great, successful people. But when the singer-songwriter came around, it kind of changed the scene forever, really. And to the point where it's got to the point now where there are no real professional songwriters anymore. Well, there are, but it's not so important anymore. And unfortunately, more people try and write their own songs, and they're not so good at it. And so we were responsible for the death of, kind of in a way, of the professional songwriter, which I find very sad. But there was an incredible boom, as you said, from 1968 onwards, of these people that wrote incredible songs and had great success at singing them. Carole King. Laura Nyro didn't have much commercial success, but she certainly influenced so many people, had great success with people like The Fifth Dimension, Blood, Sweat and Tears, writing for other people. You mentioned Randy Newman already. James Taylor, who when I first came to America, I met at his manager's house in Los Angeles, and was so thrilled because he was a product of the Beatles. The Beatles found him. So yeah, I felt a huge kinship with all the people that wrote songs. But the ones that were successful, and Carole King was by far away the most successful one at that point. I think Tapestry must have sold probably 20 million copies, at least in this country alone.
She had a success probably parallel to Norah Jones in recent times.
Exactly.
But she had the difference in that her songs were well known. Many artists had recorded her songs, R&B artists, other pop artists, and she'd even had hits herself very early in the 60s. So she was a known quantity. There was a little difference in the way she came out of it. And indeed, quite a few of the other songwriters did write in the factory writing system, like Randy Newman wrote as a contract writer. You were writing, on the other hand, with Bernie Taupin, and I imagine that when you wrote the first songs, you couldn't have known where you were headed, or did you have a definite objective?
We didn't. I mean, the first album we ever made was called Empty Sky, and it came out in 1969. It was a kind of shape of things to come. I remember trying to sound like Leonard Cohen on the album. There's a song called Hymn 2000, where the first line is, "She chose the soft center and took it to bed with her mother," which, you know, try and work that one out. Yes. You have to remember, at that time, in the 60s, we were influenced. When Bernie and I first got together, and he came to live with me at my parents' apartment in Northwood Hills, which is a suburb of North London. We used to buy records at a place called One Stop in Musicland. And there was a certain snobbery about music at that point, in the fact that you had to have an American pressing, because the cardboard was better on the sleeve. And you thought that English people thought the American pressing was better. And of course, American people thought the British pressing was better. So it was a kind of inverted snobbery. But we used to sit there and buy at least 5 or 6 albums a week, at least, that were great albums. I mean, and the width of music, which was a cultural explosion at that point. You were listening to Ravi Shankar records. You were listening to Randy Newman records. You were listening to Laura Nyro. You were listening to the Rolling Stones. You were listening to Jefferson Airplane, Captain Beefheart, Aretha Franklin, The Temptations, Stevie Wonder. It was an incredible array of music. It was an explosion that started with the Beatles and the kind of experimentation that they put on record, that George Martin helped put on them. So I, being a musician, and Bernie being a lyric writer, would sit there with our headphones on. I would be listening to bass sounds and piano sounds and drum sounds, and Bernie would be looking at lyrics, and I would be looking at lyrics too. You get a Joni Mitchell record, or you get a Leonard Cohen record, or a Bob Dylan record, or a Simon and Garfunkel. Let's not forget them, Paul Simon. So my very long-winded answer to your question is, on the Elton John album, there were so many different styles that we hadn't really found exactly the way we were going to be. There was Take Me to the Pilot, which was really funky. There was Border Song, which you played excellently, thank you, which was, again, quite funky and gospel-y. And then there were things like The Greatest Discovery, which is more like a Simon and Garfunkel.
There's something that I've always known about you. You always have a record to recommend to me. You were the first person, I think, to tell me about Rufus Wainwright. I remember you telling me Amy Winehouse is somebody to listen to. And do you feel in some way that there's a responsibility that continues throughout your career? There is allegedly a clip of Leon Russell, the great Leon Russell, introducing you on a show not dissimilar to this, A Man with a Clipboard, David Frost,
right.
and him introducing you as his new discovery. Now, it's hard to imagine now that there was a time when Leon was in a position where he was introducing you to the American public, and we can't actually prove this, but you did know Leon.
Yes, I did know Leon very well. I mean, Leon Russell, you have to accept, I grew up as a kid listening to piano players because I was a pianist. So anyone who played the piano was all right by me. I mean, Liberace was not an influence musically, but certainly physically. I mean, like with the costumes and everything, because I'd never seen anything like it when we saw his television show. Leon Russell I first encountered with Delaney and Bonnie, who were two kind of husband and wife, very funky country soul music. Leon was their piano player. Leon actually played on the piano on all the, like, Duane Eddy records. That's how he was already old. He played on Duane Eddy and all the Phil Spector records. He had this incredible long silver hair. And then I think some of you might know the Joe Cocker Mad Dogs and Englishmen, where Leon was his band, the man who ran the band. He played on the concert for Bangladesh, but he started to write the most incredible songs. And I went to see him in England and fell in love with the way he played the piano and the way he sang. And I don't think he didn't influence me at all vocally, because no one's got that kind of voice. He's got the most incredibly unorthodox voice, but certainly piano playing wise, I would say he's my biggest hero. And he's, you know, because I toured with him. I mean, I have to tell everyone, I did 2 tours with Leon Russell. And we were both happening at the same time. He was happening, I was happening. He was top of the bill, I was second on the bill. And I was terrified of him because he looked like Rasputin, the kind of one. And I remember first time I went to the Troubadour in 1970, which was my big break. And the second night there, I'm playing Burn Down the Mission, and I'm really in the midst of rocking out, and I suddenly look round and to the right, and sitting in the audience is this man with this long silver hair, and I froze, because I thought, oh God, and he wanted to meet me afterwards, and I thought, he's gonna tie me up to a chair and say, listen, you asshole, this is how to play the piano. And instead, he told me of a great throat remedy, which I've always used since, and we toured together, and it was like, there was never any hint of competition. It was always camaraderie. It was always, at the end of the show, both bands would come on and play with each other. He had an incredible organist called the Reverend Patrick Henderson. My drummer went out with his backing vocalist. We did gigs in Tulsa, and we went up to his house afterwards and played. It was the most magical of times, because here was my idol accepting me. He actually could eat me for breakfast as a piano player, because he had huge fingers. I mean, you look at these things. Look, they're terrible. But yeah, show them the clip, because this man is magic.
That's Leon Russell and Delta Lady, of course, made famous by Joe Cocker, and the ferocious energy on the...
Well, that's before I met him, because his hair got whiter than that.
It got whiter?
It got white. It was just pure white. I remember once we were in Cleveland playing in a hotel, staying in the same hotel, and I had to go and ask him what time sound check was. And I opened the door, and he opened the door, and he was completely naked, and I went, oh my God. I didn't know where to look. Well, I did, but I didn't.
That's not what you said before.
No, exactly. I just can't believe... You have to understand this. I came from England, and I was being a huge fan of someone like him. And for him to accept me and kind of take me under his wing and be really fantastic to me the whole time. As my records were just breaking out big. He was breaking big. it meant the whole world to me that someone could show me that generosity that you admired so much. It validated what I did. It helped validate me by saying, well, if he thinks I'm all right, then I must be all right, because he's my hero.
And you do share some stylistic things at the piano. You may think of yourself in his shadow as a piano player, but when something like Burn Down the Mission, you say you looked down and you saw Leon Russell playing, surely the fact that he came back and said to you, that was really great. When he has numbers that are also based in this gospel style of piano playing, that must have given you a lift at that point to go further with that.
Anyone who's as good as that says you're okay, makes you feel great. And that, you know, this is only the second day that I've been in, or third day that I've been in America. And being a young guy from England, coming to America to meet all my heroes, or, you know, see all my heroes, buy their music, go to a record store, buy the records. America was a magic place. To be validated by American musicians was, you know, gave me so much confidence, really a lot of confidence. Leon's piano style was...
I made all the words up, but that's how we used to play it.
Come on, be come on, be come on, be come on and marry me, come on and marry me, oh, do you marry me, be oh, do you marry me, be oh, do you marry me, be.
That's an incredible clip, and I think if she came up there today with that look and that sound, I think she'd take it right into the charts. And yet, this clip, which is from the Monterey Pop Festival film by D.A. Pennebaker, captures a moment in which she was regarded to have failed at that festival. You've got to understand that the Monterey Pop Festival was the first gathering of psychedelic music. It's the first big hippie festival, and the big headliners who really broke through were Hendrix, The Who, Otis Redding, Janis Joplin, and at the time, Laura Nyro with this cocktail dress, and I think she's wearing a tiara there. And this
Good for her. That's right. I knew I liked her.
But she's got a sound there with background singers, and I can imagine that some of the people at the festival maybe thought this is Vegas.
Yeah.
And they just didn't dig it. And yet you can hear the soul of the way she's singing, and also this particular song had, I think by that point, it was just about to become a hit by the Fifth Dimension. So it seems incredible to me that she didn't kind of break through with this, and success truthfully didn't sit well with her. She attempted to retire from the music business entirely at 24. Right. So did you actually ever get to meet her?
Never met her in my life. I mean, I idolized her. I mean, when I got her second album, which I think was New York Tenderberry, it had a scented inner sleeve. I mean, that's how...
How can you resist?
Yes. I idolized her. She was the first person, songwriting-wise, that there were no rules. There were tempo changes. You know, there wasn't a verse, chorus, middle eight. She didn't write in that kind of way. And that put in my mind that you didn't have to write in that old template, you know, that everybody else did. She just carried on in her own kind of weird way, and the melodies were just fantastic. And so she influenced me. I mean, for example, Burn Down the Mission. In the middle of Burn Down the Mission, I just go off into a complete tempo change. That is totally influenced by someone like Laura Nyro. She influenced more songwriters that came out, and successful songwriters, than probably any other songwriter. But before her, and this is a program that, you know, I want to eulogize these people, because if you don't know who they are, you've got to go and discover them. They're just brilliant. They're like going into an old church in Venice and seeing wonderful Veronese painting or something like that. This is music so far ahead of its time that still sounds, when you play it on whatever system you have, still sounds unbelievable. The soul, the passion, just the out-and-out audacity of her, the way her rhythmic and melody changes come, was like nothing I'd ever heard before.
Even the first chords of Burn Down the Mission are kind of like a Laura Nyro pinch.
Tell me there's an angel in your tree. Did you say it come to call on me? Things are getting desperate in our home. Living in the pirates of the restless folks I know. Everybody now, bring your family down to the riverside. Look to the east to see where the five dog are high. Behind four walls are stuck, the rich man is asleep. It's time to put the flame torch to their key.
There you go. There's that tempo change there, which you used to do, and then you go. And then that is so Laura Nyro, and I didn't rip it off from her, but I was so influenced because that's the kind of thing. She just went off at tangents, and she put codas where verses should be, she put verses where choruses should be, and she put God knows what into the most magical songs you'll ever hear.
One record that came a little bit after and almost summarized where she had come from after she had made New York Tender, Bury Needle, and 13th Confession, these incredible, expansive records with incredible orchestrations. She made a record of Brill Building songs called Gonna Take a Miracle with Up on the Roof on it, and a song called The Bells. It was an obscure Motown song. And on that record, she was backed by LaBelle, and I think that was the first time that I really appreciated Patti LaBelle. Didn't you know Patti LaBelle? Didn't you play with Patti LaBelle?
I did. I played, when I left school, I joined Mills Music I left school at 16 and joined Mills Music Publishing Company in London as a T-boy and someone who packed up the sheet music and took it round to the post office. It doesn't sound glamorous, but Denmark Street, where, you know, was at the end, it was the most famous street music publishing-wise in the whole of the world.
It was sort of the English Brill Building area, wasn't it?
And so it was an in for me. I still had my semi-professional band called Bluesology, and I was working in the music business for a pittance, but it was exciting, and that's what I wanted to do. I never really honestly ever thought I'd become Elton John, all I wanted to do was be in the music business. If I couldn't play in a band, then I'd work in a publishing house or a record company or a record store. As long as it involved music. My band had an offer to turn professional, and we turned professional because we were offered a tour with Major Lance, who was a great R&B recording star, not sitting in the part. He was a recording artist for OK Records, which is a very famous rhythm and blues record label. And then after we finished the Major Lance tour, we were offered Patti LaBelle. And Patti LaBelle, you know, I was a huge fan of her music, and we rehearsed with her, and this was when Cindy Birdsong was in the group before she joined the Supremes. I learned so much from my latter day experience with stagecraft and how to perform a song, how to talk to an audience, how to work hard. And she used to call me Reggie because that was my name at the time. And it was fantastic to work with her. And because these people were so professional. They were incredibly professional. They came over for a pittance, but the adulation they received in Britain, they were famous in Britain. People loved them.
There was a harsher reality behind the fact that you got to play with them, surely enough. They were sent over, and you got the opportunity to perform with them because they were sent over without the accompanying musicians who'd played on their records.
Oh yeah, they couldn't
So
afford
was it
that.
a little bit of a shock to find that these people that you had maybe in your mind as stars, because these were the records that you loved, were actually struggling in their own way, the way you had just been struggling?
Yes, I mean, I couldn't believe, you know, they came over with like 4 sets of clothes, all the sheet music. I mean, I was petrified because I had to play Danny Boy in D flat. I remember that. I mean, moving on from her, I mean, I remember going to pick Martha and the Vandellas up from London Airport. They were coming over for a tour. And by that time, I'd made it as Elton John. And I went there in my Aston Martin, which, if you know an Aston Martin, it's quite small. It's got a seat in the back and a seat in the front and very small seats in the back. And I remember going to pick them up, and they all crammed into the car, all 4 of them. And they had to borrow money to get their clothes out of the cleaners to come over. And it astounded me that these people, who were my idols, were basically getting ripped off. It opened my eyes so much that the fact that these people who, you know, were the stars, big stars of R&B, you know, had to borrow money to get their clothes out to come to England to play with a pickup band. Shocking. And then the other tour that I did was with Billy Stewart. Now, Billy Stewart was an enormous R&B singer who was signed to Chess Records, a very famous label from Chicago. And he sang in a certain style, like, I do love you. And it was a lot of falsetto. And he had a song called Sitting in the Park. Sitting in the park, waiting for you. And then he did, summertime, and he was brilliant. And at the same time, in England, there was a guy called Georgie Fame, who was brilliant, fantastic singer, kind of influenced by Mose Allison, but did a lot of, really a great organ player, singer, and had a hit with Sitting in the Park. And Billy Stewart, we were backing Billy Stewart, who was this immense man. And we were playing a club in Windsor called the Ricky Chick, which was a very famous R&B club. And someone shouted, some mod in the audience shouted, Georgie Fame. Well, Billy Stewart jumped off the stage. I mean, you've got to realize he's a 30-stone man, and ran through the crowd after this poor guy. I mean, it's like, he must have just dropped everything at once. I mean, this guy, I mean, he was... And then Billy Stewart was, I think, the most underrated R&B singer ever, and certainly one of the greatest showmen I've ever met. And unfortunately, he came back to America, and 6 months he was shot dead. But he taught me so much.
Working in a coal mine, going down, down, down. Working in a coal mine, about to slip down. Working in a coal mine, going down, down, down. Working in a coal mine, oh, about to slip down. Sure, I make a little money, hauling coal by the ton. But when Saturday rolls around, we're too tired to have any fun. It's not for fun. Working in a coal mine, going down, down, down. Working in a coal mine, about to slip down. Working coal mine, going, working, oh, about to slip down. Oh Lord, I'm so tired. How long can this go on? Working, going, working, about to slip down. Working, going, working, coal mine, about to slip down.
Alan Toussaint.
You and I share something in that we both adopted a new identity to get started, and I know that it helped me sort of start again with songwriting. Yes. I had a group of songs, and then I found the way I was thinking and the way I looked and the way I was named all fitted together. Right. But it took me a while to work out whether this new identity was supposed to be a suit of armor or this sort of Superman suit that I got into in a telephone box and sort of emerged out of it. Did you ever think about whether you could go back?
I am so happy to change my name. I mean, I was christened Reginald Kenneth Dwight. Now, Reggie isn't such a bad name in America, but in England, I mean, I played with a guy called Long John Baldry, who's a legendary English blues singer for a long time, and every time I would travel in the van with him, he'd drop me off at home about 4 o'clock in the morning and go, Reggie!
I think they would probably do it.
Yeah, and also, you know that if you're going to make a record, Reg Dwight is not going to make it. I'm sorry. It's just not going to make it. It's like Randy Van Warmer. Remember him?
Yes.
It's like, it's just not going to make it. You just,
I thought that was something
you
you could buy, actually, a Randy Van Warmer.
Yes.
You know, I think it was something you...
So,
Shopping network.
I just had to choose a name very quickly. I chose it from the sax player in my band, who was called Elton Dean, and Long John Baldwin. I put them together as Elton John. And I wanted a name that sounded American. And also wanted a name that nobody else had. The only person I knew that was Elton before that was a guy called Elton Hayes, who was an English folk singer who recorded The Owl and the Pussycat. So I thought, I'm all right there, because he's not going to have a resurgence. But as a suit of armor, it was kind of, I did enjoy becoming Elton. And I still get people calling out Reggie from the audience, and I just like go, I just hate it. I'm Elton.
I think you're
now.
entitled by now to be seen.
But even if my mum can call me Elton.
I think that's right.
Eric Clapton called me Reg for a long time, and I used to go, and in the end, I had the courage to say to him, because he is God. Eric, I am Elton now.
I think that's completely appropriate.
But why Elvis?
That was really just picked up by my manager, who just thought, this is, you know, if you think about the year that I began making records, it was 1977. You had Captain Sensible,
right.
You know, Johnny Rotten, Sid Vicious, Rat Scabies. I think I got off quite lightly.
Yeah,
you know?
yeah.
I mean, really, it could have been much worse. Imagine if, you know, to be sitting up here.
But you made a wise choice. I mean, Declan McManus, people would, you know, thinking...
Impossible to say, but expecting
you know,
a guy in a cable knit sweater singing wailing songs.
Yes,
you know?
Or from, remember a group called The Bachelors? I think.
Exactly, he was the only other Declan I knew growing up.
Yeah. So we both lucked out there.
But I think you definitely lucked out.
And we both chose E. There's something really weird about that.
Well, I think that's somewhere in the deep memory is because the Elvis sign, when Elvis Presley appeared, definitely looked pretty forceful, you know?
There is a guy called Costello Presley. He used to write all the music for male porno music. For male porno movies. It was like music by Costello Presley.
Elton.
Oh, yeah?
It's my sideline.
There you go.
I thought they would never guess.
Right.
Obviously, you've written songs with a number of other lyricists, but your most famous and most enduring collaboration has been with Bernie Taupin. And you talked before about this very, I think, very touching description of sitting and listening to records and poring over the details of record albums as they were then, and finding your way and making these first decisions together. But as time has gone on, Bernie lives in the west coast of America. You're sometimes many miles apart. Bernie also has a really deep fascination, bordering on obsession, with the history and mythology of the Old West, which has been dotted through the lyrics over the years. Did you always feel comfortable with this, or do you have a cowboy suit somewhere in your closet? You know.
I always felt comfortable with it because it coincided a lot of the on Tumbleweed. When we talked earlier about when did we actually find our true identity, I think it came with the Tumbleweed Connection album, which was an album full of songs that kind of sounded more or less the same. There was not. It sounded very basic. There were some arrangements on it, but it was very funky. And it's because by that time I was very influenced by the band. I'm hearing music from Big Pink was one of the turning points of my life, hearing that band play in that way and the way they recorded their songs. And so on that album, there's a huge amount of band influence. There's a big Van Morrison influence in some, especially things like Amarina. Lately, I've been thinking, it's such a Van Morrison. When I look at it now, it wasn't consciously then, but I can look back and think, God, you were listening to a lot of Van Morrison then, and I was. And then there was the Laura Nyro influence, but the funkiness of Burn Down the Mission. And I think that album is where we found our feet. And so those lyrics fitted into the gospel sound, or that kind of funky sound that the band had. It was all about Americana. I just loved the fact that I didn't have to write the lyrics, because I'm not any good at it. People have always said, Elton, you're very verbose, you're very intelligent, you can have a good conversation with someone. Why don't you write the lyrics? You know, I've tried a couple of times and it just isn't within me. I mean, I'm good at writing melodies. Bernie is great at writing lyrics. And I've never lost the excitement of seeing a new lyric, like your song, going into my parents' living room in Northwood Hills, writing it, and then bringing Bernie into the room and saying, here it is, I've memorized it. Here's the song. That's the way it's always been since then. There's never, even though we were living in the same place, there was never any collaboration at all writing the songs. We've never been in the same room ever writing a song. He would probably kill me, I would probably kill him. And I've never questioned it. It's just like, it works, it's great. You know, when I came out the closet and said I was gay, you know, that was when the she's started drying up. Everything then became, it could either be about a man or a woman. And that is very clever of him to do that, because after a certain point, I can't go on stage and think, you know, sing, she's fantastic, if a new song, I'm in love with her. Nobody would buy that in a million years. We have this canny relationship where we're like brothers, we're like soulmates, and he's always written really with me in mind what I'm going through, and I really love that. I value my relationship with Bernie more than anything else in my professional career, and I have fantastic relationships with my musicians, I still do, but to be with someone for 41 years and to never have an argument, which we haven't. We've fallen, you know, we've separated and written with other people, but we've never actually had an argument. So my relationship with Bernie is very, very special to me, and it doesn't mean to say I might not write with anybody else in the future, but we've done all that. He didn't care about The Lion King. He was very happy about The Lion King. He's gone on...
They also reach different audiences, those sort of projects.
And he's not capable of doing things like that, nor does he want to.
I think it's wonderful that you have sustained this relationship and that you are able now to talk seriously about writing songs that belong to you in this moment that you're in, the two of you.
We have to write songs that are part of the times we live in now. And because if we didn't, we'd be ignoring what has to be said, and we'd be, you know, we'd be just being fake. We have to write what we feel about.
I've been traveling, gone a long, long time. Don't know what I'll find, scared of what I'll find.
So extraordinary for me to see him come to life, because I've been looking at a very similarly framed picture of him on his record sleeves for 35 or more years. You did know his records prior to...
Before I went to the Troubadour in 1970, he was one of the people that I'd latched onto that I really loved as a songwriter, because he played piano, obviously, and because he was a great storyteller. And Bernie loved his music as well, and his lyrics. And the most incredible thing is when I landed in Los Angeles and I was playing the Troubadour Club, I was actually playing top of the bill and David Ackles was playing under me. And I could not figure that out for the life of me. I was so overwhelmed and so embarrassed. And that when I met him and told him how much I loved him, and as far as, not how much I loved him, I love you. I loved his music, and Bernie did likewise. But it did embarrass me that I was top of the bill over David Ackles, but we became very good friends.
He's a very interesting character, because he was actually a relatively successful child actor, and he had formal training. He had educational training in film and dance, and after his recording career did stall, Bernie produced his most acclaimed record, American Gothic. He made one more album for Columbia and then seemed to disappear, and I was heartbroken when he disappeared, because I waited for his records to come out. I spent so much time alone with the first album, David Ackles, just poring over the meaning and all the unusual styles of songs that he had. Again, as you said, Laura Nyro did. There were songs that I didn't know where this music came from. There were songs on his first record and on his second record that I now know were taking their cues from Kurt Weill. There were things that were related to Ray Charles. There were things that sounded like theater music. And it seems unusual, really, a man of these skills didn't go on to, say, enjoy the same sort of success in the theater that you have.
I think it's weird. I mean, if you analyze it, we talk about Laura Nyro and David Ackles, people like Tim Buckley, who were another big, Tim Hardin, who were great songwriters. There were some people, I don't think Laura Nyro kind of wanted, I think commercial success would have freaked her out. As you say, she'd retired at 24.
Attempted to.
David Ackles, I don't think was really interested in being a big star. He was just happy to make his music.
And he did, in fact, towards the end of his life, he sadly died quite relatively young.
Yeah.
But he was working in community theatre and he was teaching. So maybe that's you or I's fate is to keep going and play music and continue to make records and look for new ways to play.
There's an
and for some people, they're working at the level, and it's not failure to be there.
No.
Maybe it would be wrong to say
David
it's a
Ackles was
failure.
by no means a failure because he influenced so many people and he influenced me. And there's an echelon of artists like that who have an incredible following and a solid following that never become as successful as they should be. I just want to talk about the quality of things, and the quality of things in the era that we're talking about, even the 60s, and in popular music in 60s, 70s, was so much better than it is today. People were genuine performers. People went out there and learned, you didn't get a record contract until you'd actually played live. There were 10 or 11 records that you could have bought every week that were great records. When you get something that comes along like a Rufus Wainwright, that it is of, if you send it back 30 or 40 years, would have been enormous. Would have been at least had the chance for people to hear it on the radio. What I'm saying is there are people around like Ron Sexsmith, for example, a great Canadian songwriter, who writes the most beautiful songs. He's never going to get played on the radio. It's tragic, it's disgusting. This is, these people are genuinely talented. Everyone we've talked about on this show is pure and utter quality. All the great R&B stars that even you, like Garnet Mims, all those great old people that we loved, Betty Everett, all those people. I mean, if I meet them, I'm in, it's like for me meeting the Beatles or something like that. They are the people that influenced my life. Leon Russell, who wrote, I've seen so many places in my life and time.
Well,
Song for You, right?
A Song for You, I think that I was at Willie Nelson's 70th birthday concert at the Beacon Theatre, but an enormous cast, Shania Twain, Toby Keith, my wife and I, Nora Jones, and Kenny Chesney, and all of these people, and everybody's gathered around in a monitor in the green room in the basement, watching Leon, Willie, and Ray Charles perform Song for You.
Right.
And to hearing the man who wrote this song hand it to Willie Nelson to sing was one thing, but watching Willie hand it to Ray Charles to conclude may have been the greatest moment of Ray Charles on film in later life. The performance was startling, and it must have been so absolutely shattering for Leon to see his song completely realized. And I saw on occasion with Ray Charles singing Sorry Seems to Be the Hardest Word, and just the opening line, I would imagine that would have been worth everything of writing it, just to hear him sing the opening line.
That was the last record he ever made, and he was so frail and so, we were all shocked. I was actually recording an album in Los Angeles. My band were there, and Ray came in and had to be helped into the studio. So skinny, so frail, and we sat in two big armchairs. And he had, "Hi, sweetheart, well, let's get it on, let's do it." And even though he was so weak, when the tape started, he sang in an unmistakable force of his, that voice. And people were crying in the studio, because this was to be the last time he'd ever go in a recording studio. And we did a couple of takes, but before we did a couple of takes, we talked. And I have that on CD. We talked for about half an hour. You got to remember, I grew up as a songwriter with Bernie. Becoming Elton John was an accident because nobody recorded our songs because they were horrible, that we wrote for other people. The songs we wrote for ourselves, they were good. So I ended up recording the songs we wrote for ourselves, and I became successful. This is the boy who started off in Mills Music in Denmark Street, not knowing what's going to happen. And I became that, and it all happened by accident. But having Ray Charles sing your song is like, I'm not a snob. Anyone records my song, I like it. William Hung did 2 of my songs. And I was thrilled. I was absolutely thrilled. Because you never lose that thrill saying, oh, I wrote that, it's great. I never listen to my old stuff. I never listen to my stuff. But if you're in an elevator or a shop and you hear, Daniel is traveling tonight, they think, oh, yeah, I know. And Sorry Seems to Be the Hardest Word by Ray Charles. And also Frank Sinatra is another great story. Frank Sinatra was doing a concert at the Royal Albert Hall in London, and I invited Bernie and I to the show and sat us in the front row, and was always so sweet to me. I was terrified of him because, the stories you hear, but he was the nicest person in the world to me. And, hey kid, how you doing? Great stuff, and lovely to Bernie. And halfway through the show, he introduced us, and we had to stand up, which was, how embarrassing that is. It's like, oh God. And then, without telling us, he sang Sorry Seems to Be the Hardest Word. And that, he never recorded it, but he sang it at the Royal Albert Hall, and I'll never forget it. It was right. I came home, I phoned my mum, I phoned everybody. Frank Sinatra sang one of my songs. Because basically, I'm still a writer. I'm still a fan. When you say I like to champion young people, we're music crazy, both of us. As we get out into our advancing years, we seem to love music even more. But the music I love, I'm getting more picky about, because I like to pick out the good things. And when I hear the good things, then I'm going to champion them.
Well, I have to thank you for talking to us in this way, and your passion is there for everybody to hear.
I hope it hasn't been too boring. Has it been boring? No? No? Yeah.
I want to thank Elton once again for his generosity and the passion with which he spoke about so many musicians and songwriters that he loved, and I can't think of any better way to end than with what I think may be our first ever television appearance singing together. This is the David Ackles song, Downriver.
Good to see you again, Rosie. I know I changed a lot since then, but you're looking fine, baby. 3 years, that ain't long, Rosie. I still remember our song when you were mine, babe. Times change, I know, but it sure moves slow downriver when you're locked away.
Hey, why didn't you write, Rosie? I stayed awake most every night, counting my time, babe. Oh no, I ain't mad, Rosie. I know you had to mind your dad, but just a line, babe.
Oh sure, I remember Ben. Why? We went all through school. Is that right? Yeah. Well, he ain't no fool.
He's a good man, Rosie. Hold him tight as you can. Don't ask me why, babe.
Yeah, nice seeing you again, Rosie. Me, I got things to do. Well, goodbye, babe. Times change.